Cool. I think we actually started that at like the same time this time.
I think so. That would be cool if we did.
All right.
Alrighty. Let me know when you got the video up.
Yeah, it's up. We're good.
All right. Welcome back to the show, everybody.
We will hopefully be consistently weekly from here on out.
Absolutely. And we had something else that we wanted to unveil, or did we want to unveil that now?
Yeah, we can reveal it. So we started a Discord server. It's what we've been using to have these conversations. And I just kind of expanded on the Discord server. There's going to be a general chat so people can talk about, basically participate in these discussions. And then on top of that, we also have a topic discussion. So if you guys have any ideas, give them to us and we'll go ahead and look through them, and it'll give us an idea of how we're going to approach each episode. Exactly. That should hopefully be up, if not with this episode, by next week. Yep. That's what I'm hoping for. I just got to set up a few more things and then we should be good.
Yep. The whole thing is basically finding ways to get you guys involved more and to also give us more to work with for our conversations. That way we can actually bring you guys stuff that you want to hear about. And I think it'd be good probably if we did some research. We'll do research on stuff and then we could actually bring the research to the show. I feel like that'd be cool.
I think that would be cool. I think that would be a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So before this, me and Amir were actually talking about some of the different regulations and whatnot with COVID that have been thrown about recently, things that the LA Times has written about in regards to the regulations that California is considering putting in place, their health department. And also, more generally, we've been talking about some of the different narratives that people have been getting sucked into surrounding the vaccine, these new regulations, and also just the general ideas that have been thrown around and that people have gotten sucked into regarding COVID and vaccines and whatnot. Yeah.
So kind of start with the conversation, I think. So let's start with this. I got my first dose yesterday. Okay.
Right.
That would be Monday. So the Monday that this goes out, I got my first dose and I wanted to get it. And then Josh, you're of a different opinion where you're like, I'm not going to get it until I have to get it.
Right. Because obviously, and this is one thing where because obviously some people think that, we shouldn't be forced to get this vaccine. It's like this new thing and freedom and whatnot. People should be allowed to get it or not get it because good reasons. We'll talk about them. And I think that that's kind of weird because there's all kinds of vaccines that, for example, to go to school, you have to have, and that may be different in certain states. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but for sure, there are vaccines you have to have in order to attend school, And Amir, you brought up a good point in our conversation about how there's a certain disease, like I think it was polio.
It was polio or smallpox. I don't remember.
Right.
And I'll make sure to look that up next time. But there was a disease. We'll just say it's polio. And if I'm wrong, just look it up. You'll be able to figure out what I'm talking about. But in the 80s, we got rid of this disease by using vaccines and utilizing them, and this disease was no longer a problem, right? It wasn't spreading amongst children. We didn't have to worry about it. Okay, cool. And in the recent years, anti-vax movements have gotten larger, and less kids have gotten vaccines. And I'm pretty sure it was polio or smallpox. It made a comeback, and people started getting it again. This disease that has been gone for the past 40 years now showed up again because people weren't getting those vaccines.
Right.
So my thinking is, well, vaccines work. We know they work. We can prove that they work. And so when people get weird about, vaccines being mandatory, it's like, well, they already are. And there's reason for it. Now, don't get me wrong. I get why some people are kind of weird about it. That's fine. But I just think that that's kind of a poor reason to not get it. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah. I think the reason I'm not getting it, and I feel like this is a much more sensible, kind of rational reason not to get it, is because I'm a young person. I am already at low to no risk of having severe symptoms. I'm pretty healthy. I get lots of vitamin D, vitamin E, zinc. I get, sunlight and whatnot. Less so lately, but, I take all my vitamins. And for most of my life, I've been exercising and whatnot. Again, not so much recently, but overall, if you look at me, I'm pretty healthy. I'm not worried about getting COVID and having bad symptoms, getting really sick or something. So I'm not going to get the vaccine because for me, if I weigh it out, I feel like the potential side effects or unknowns with the vaccine probably won't be, but could outweigh the probability of me getting or even having a severe case of COVID. So to me, it just doesn't really make sense because I'm like, even if I did get COVID, it's almost 100% chance that I'll be completely fine.
And so for me, my reasoning for getting it, right, different point of view, is, okay, between the two of us, I pointed this out, I probably go out more than you do, right? Yeah. And for me, I just felt safer getting it. I would rather feel kind of for a few days with the vaccine than get COVID. I don't know how it affects people with heart conditions. From what I've read, that's not a big thing you need to be careful of, but better safe than sorry. And for me, I wanted to get it because I would feel safer doing the things I want to do. Like, I want to travel this summer. I want to do things like that. And for me, having the vaccine would make me feel safer doing those things and not really having to worry about getting COVID and giving it to someone. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. And then one of the things I find particularly perplexing is how things like the COVID vaccine are being held up, and there's commercials about them. You'll see it on the news and whatnot. They're kind of being held up as like this virtuous thing that you can do. Like, it's super good. Yeah, it's literally blatant virtue signaling, where it's like, I got the vaccine, it's a super great thing. And I know lots of people, I have friends who, they'll post on their social media, they're like, look, I got this COVID vaccine and whatnot. And so one of the things that me and you were talking about was how people kind of get sucked into these narratives and these movements or whatnot. And we can talk about why, you want to be a part of something, social pressure, it's seen as a good thing, you want to be seen doing a good thing, these kinds of things, right? Which aren't necessarily all bad. And, if you look at human behavior, it's understandable why they happen and why people buy into them and to do them, right? But it just seems so strange, And it seems even stranger when you have this kind of social pressure to do something like that, when it is an experimental vaccine, it's a new thing, it hasn't been around for very long, and so it's understandable why people would feel a little uneasy about getting it. And so to think that you might not be able to question it, or if you even say that, oh, this could possibly not be the best thing, that you would be kind of looked down upon, is a little weird to me.
You pointed out, I didn't realize this, and we could look it up to be for sure, but you said it hasn't even been technically FDA approved, which it's been it's been approved for emergency use, right? I think that's something people need to realize. It was approved for emergency use. That doesn't necessarily mean it was FDA approved. And to our knowledge, I didn't know this before. Josh told me. It hasn't been. Yeah. It just got approved for emergency funding. So I get why people would be weird about it, right? And why some people just wouldn't necessarily want to get it right now, or would want to wait until maybe it's been FDA approved or whatever. I think that's reasonable. I think that's a reasonable reason to not necessarily want to get it. Just like I think a reasonable reason to want to get it is because you feel safer with it. Like how I said, I want to, or rather I got it because for me, I feel safer having it. Now that said, if you get it because of social pressure, I think that you're getting it for the wrong reason. Right? If you don't get it because of social pressure, because there is also that, and we can get into that, I think that's a dumb reason to not get it. Right? Because in certain places, like in California, for example, it's like, oh, you should get it, right? It's a good thing to get, and it's like this virtuous thing. Oh, look, you got the vaccine. I got the vaccine, right?
Yeah. And people post it, and they're like, look, I got my vaccine, all that.
And it's kind of like, okay. And there's kind of this social pressure of, well, this is the right thing to do. This is what you should be doing. And it's like, we can get into that, but then the other side of that is, no, you shouldn't get it, right? This is, no, government control, blah, blah, blah. Someone said, oh, it's the mark of the beast. If you don't know what that is, it's a biblical thing. Look it up. I really don't want to explain it. Yeah. Ridiculous reasons on both sides, right? That will use different things to pressure people into doing it or to not do it. And it's like, okay, hold on. Stop. And wait a second. Whatever happened to individual responsibility, which is something that, people on one side of the spectrum will say, yeah, they're all for it, but then they're going, no, you shouldn't get it. And it's like, okay, well, what if they want to? And then the other
you
side
even
of that
brought
is,
up a specific case in Florida where they wanted to try and pass a law that prevented businesses from making it mandatory to wear a mask in those businesses.
yeah. So, and I'm pretty sure
it ends
Florida.
up being like, well, what happened to freedom? You know?
Exactly. Yeah. In Florida, what happened was they were trying to push a bill, and I don't know if whether or not it got approved, that private businesses cannot have mandatory mask mandates inside their business. But again, for the party that claims to be for private businesses, individual decision making, and private businesses being allowed to do what they want to do, they're all of a sudden like, no, because it doesn't go with what we believe, right?
Again, it's all part of the narrative, right? Like the party positions, whatever the party positions are, right? And it has to be the opposite of the other party's positions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. That's like, I don't think that's the best way to approach politics, but it's been like that forever, and I don't think it's ever going to change. Back to the point, though. There's a lot of weird social pressures with the vaccine. In California, where we're from, like you said, see it all the time. People saying, oh, look, I got the vaccine. This is the good thing to do. People saying you should get the vaccine, which, don't get me wrong, right? My belief is that getting the vaccine is a good thing, and if you want to get it, you should get it. That's my belief, right? I am of the belief that you should get it. However, I don't think that I have the right to force that belief onto you, for example. I shouldn't have to say, no, you have to get it, right? Mm-hmm. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I think it's a good thing to get, but I also understand why someone wouldn't want to get it. And I think what I would like to see more of is, one, people holding the belief that I do that you should get it, saying that, but then the other side saying, look, I don't necessarily want to get it, but if you do, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is, here's what happens. The people that don't necessarily want to get it, the people like me who did want to get it will say that the people that don't want to get it are stupid, they're ignorant, they're selfish, they don't care about anybody, this, and that, whatever. And then the other side will go, oh, if you get it,
sheep.
You're a sheep,
you're spying into the narrative, you're just virtue signaling, you're just bullshitting,
but you're doing the same thing, though. It's like you're doing the same thing within the narrative within your region that you live in. So you're both doing the same things, right? And you got to be careful with that. It's like, okay, you realize you're both buying into a narrative and perpetuating that narrative, even if it's not necessarily true. And you're both doing the same thing of insulting the other side when they don't agree with you. And it's like, okay, hold on. That's not... If you want to convince people, hey, maybe you should get it, don't insult them when they question it, when they go, maybe I don't want to get it. You know what I mean? That's how you turn people away. They're not going to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and then the other thing too, and this is when you know that someone is just kind of going with the flow more, and they're buying into a narrative as opposed to sort of thinking things through themselves, which, by the way, if you aren't reflecting on your beliefs and you aren't thinking things through yourself, you're going to run into this issue where someone might say something that you disagree with, but you don't actually know why you disagree with them. I had this experience with a friend not too long ago, actually, where I said something in response to something that he had said because I disagreed with him, and he just kind of moved on to something else. Like, the conversation about that thing just ended because he couldn't respond to what I said.
And it was at that moment. I've had the same thing.
Yeah, it's this thing that happens where you throw a point out there because you think that this is the thing to say, this is the right thing, and it could be anything, it could be saying that you could say well, trans people don't deserve to do contact sports, and it could be on the other side saying, well, trans people should absolutely be able to do any sport. The gender that they identify with is the gender that they are, and people will just throw stuff like that out there without actually thinking about it in any kind of nuanced way, considering the other side. Why would someone disagree with that? Why would someone disagree with what you're saying there? And so when you disagree, they either will become very militant about it, or sometimes they just shut down because they really don't have anything to say about it. They don't really know anything.
And they don't know why they believe things. That's the issue, right? Yeah. Is if you don't know why you believe something, or you don't know why you want to do something, you're doing it because of societal pressure, like the vaccine. I got it because I wanted to get it, and for no other reason than that. I could care less about what other people are saying about getting it. I don't care that people that I know that we went to school with are like, oh yeah, you should get it. I don't care. That has no reasoning into why I got it. I got it for my own sake and my sanity because I feel better having it.
Yeah.
If you're just getting it because you think it's expected, because you think you should be doing it, it's like, okay, how about you think for yourself for a second and go, okay, well, why do I want to get it personally, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying you all of a sudden shouldn't get it if you realize you're only getting it because of societal pressure. I'm saying think about why you want to do it. And if you come to the conclusion, maybe I don't want to, okay, then while I may disagree with that, fine. Like, you do what you want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, man.
It's the weirdest thing when it's someone you know personally or someone who's a friend and they say something that you maybe disagree with, and so you try and push back on that, and then you can't have a productive conversation about it. So it gets weird, you know? And again, that just goes into this whole idea of like people getting sucked into narratives and really failing to think critically, you know?
I agree. And I think that that's an important thing that everyone, I mean, you and I could definitely be better at that sometimes, is thinking critically, right? Don't get me wrong. I like to think that you and I do, but the reality is that, like, there's always room for improvement. And I think that, you know, but that's something we encourage is, okay, think for yourself, think critically. Okay, why do you believe something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you can't give a reason as to why you believe something, why do you, right? Then it's like,
then you have to figure it out. Then it's like, well, why do I believe it? You know, you have to dig into that. Start asking questions. It's like, why do I believe this thing? You know?
Exactly. I think that that's an important thing to do. I think that with any belief, it could be, let's say, with the COVID vaccine, it could be with your political beliefs, it could be with your religious beliefs. I don't care what it is.
And if you don't want to look into it, then at least say that, well, I don't really know. You know, that I think it's the kind of, the burden is then on you to have some humility and say, well, you know, I think this thing, but I don't really know. You know?
I don't know why.
I'm not really sure, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, no, damn, sorry. No, I agree. I think if you don't necessarily know why you believe something, like you said, just, I don't know.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. I think that that's something that we could definitely do better on, is recognize that, like, it's okay to not know things. It's okay to not know why you believe something. Like, that's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Just don't stay there. You know what I mean? I think that's the first step, is recognizing, you know, I don't know why I believe this. Let me figure that out. Right? And maybe you come to a conclusion where you realize, what I actually believe is different than this thing I said I believe. Or your reasoning is, no, I believe this thing, but now I have a reason for believing it.
Like, I'm more sure of it now. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think
kind of thought
that's
this thing and now I'm more sure. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that that's something that we as people could do better on, is really think about why you believe the things you believe. You know?
One of the craziest things that I feel like social media has absolutely helped to fuel recently is these kind of little things where you throw out like a point, like a sentence maybe, and that's it. You know, you don't have to have a productive conversation about it, you know, especially like Twitter, like people just go on Twitter. Yeah, you could just say anything. You could leave a comment, whatever, and you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to even defend it or whatever. You could just say something and then watch everybody else kind of swirl about and say other things, you know? And
yeah,
I think that absolutely affects reality when people get used to, you know, reading things and consuming information in that way, and then being part of whatever group you want to be a part of. If you want to be the, you know, maybe you're the person who says a certain thing, and then you always have to be the person who like says that thing, and you know, maybe you don't even stop to think about it sometimes, you know. And that is a sort of constant process that has to go on. It's not like you just think about something once and then you're like, well, I figured it out. Now I know that thing. And, you know, or you think about something you believe maybe, and you say like, okay, why do I believe this thing? And then, okay, I know why I believe it now. All right, I got that. It's done.
It's a constant process. No, exactly. It's never done. You will never, look, your reason for believing something one day may not be your same reason for believing it another. You know what I mean? It's a constant process of figuring out. That's the thing. Beliefs change all the time. The beliefs I held in high school are not the same beliefs I hold now. The beliefs I held a year ago aren't necessarily the same beliefs. Are different.
Yeah.
They might be similar, right? They might be more thought out, whatever it is. but they're not always going to be the same, and they shouldn't be. We should seek to grow and evolve as people in the way that we think. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I feel like the ideas and the beliefs that we have in with ourselves that we learn and that we get from other places, they create all this, and from our own experiences, they create like this complex web, or almost like a complex machine full of like cogs and gears, where, you know, if you move one, it kind of affects how all the other ones move. And so in order to change things, or when you're thinking about things, you're kind of like if we take like that, you know, gear analogy and imagine that like all our beliefs and ideas are this complex machine, then, you know, if you take one of those things out, it like kind of changes how the whole thing works. It might not work the same anymore. You might have to like then adjust other parts in order to get it to work again, or put in new parts or whatever.
There's an example I learned in one of my philosophy classes that I think puts what you're saying really well. And it's this idea of a jigsaw puzzle, and your beliefs are a jigsaw puzzle. The beliefs that maybe aren't that important, are easily kind of interchangeable, are the edge pieces. You can kind of switch them out and it's still generally the same thing. It's those core things that you can't just pick out, right?
Yeah, like if you take something right out of the middle of that jigsaw puzzle,
it's completely different.
It's like, well, the
it affects everything else.
There's a hole in the picture now.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense anymore.
I don't think that people realize how interconnected a lot of their beliefs really are. Mm-hmm. And how, so, I mean, I can almost guarantee you that, maybe not almost guarantee, but I would place money that people that believe you should get the vaccine typically lean somewhere from center to the left, right? And people that think you shouldn't lean the other direction. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty confident in that. It's not that hard to figure that out, right? That's a pretty obvious example. Mm-hmm. But there's other things, you know. I don't know. Let me think of another thing. Religious views, right? That's another thing that's interesting. Is the way that people will interpret things differently within religion.
Their religions.
Within their religions, then you'll get people that are kind of more liberal and more conservative, and it's like, okay, it's just, I don't know, it's interesting, but
yeah, it is, because, you know, speaking of how all these different beliefs and whatnot are connected to others and to each other. If you're, for example, if you identify strongly as being someone who's more libertarian, you like the idea of people having freedoms and whatnot, a lot of your other ideas and beliefs will probably be connected to that idea that people should have freedoms and be allowed to do what they want, wear what they want, express themselves how they want, etc. Right? And so when changing one of those beliefs that's connected to that bigger idea of freedom and libertarianism and whatnot, it has to fit in with that. Like if you try to take out an idea and put in a different idea that doesn't seem to work with that those overarching libertarian ideals, then it's like it feels wrong, you know.
Yeah.
And the same thing can be said if you're if you held more conservative beliefs, you believe in doing things in a traditional manner, etc., and you try and put something into that world that doesn't belong there, or that doesn't seem to fit, it won't work. It will like feel wrong, right?
Yeah.
And you can do that with anything. If you identify as someone who is Catholic, and you try and wedge some religious thing in there that doesn't fit with the Catholic idea of things, it doesn't work. You like reject that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean you put it great. I think that. Yeah. No. I don't know. I don't know how to build off that, because you said it well. I mean, I think.
He's like, what do I think?
Exactly. Here's something that's funny that I just, quick side note real quick. In our culture, that silence that was just there is expected to always be filled like that. Boom. You're not supposed to let silence exist.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Right? I don't know if you noticed that. That's not like here. People get weird when there's a silence like that.
Yeah.
But in other places, it's like, no, if you're not silent, sometimes it means you're not thinking about what you're going to say. You're just kind of spitting shit out.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to have a silence. This is one thing you said. It's weird. I think it's only weird if there's a disagreement about it being weird or something. You know, if like you have one person who finds it weird and another person who's like, no, this is good. We should sit and like think. That's when it gets weird, you know? Or if you have people who think it's weird, that's when it's weird, you know?
That's true.
Because
your perception of it is what defines it as weird or not.
Exactly. It's how do you feel about it? How do you use the silence? You know, we've done a lot of podcasts. We've done probably close to 100. Definitely double digits. Yeah. And one of the things that I noticed with a lot of our guests is that we could have silences usually, and that's fine. It was fine. It was normal. It was normal. Part of the conversation to have those pauses in there.
Well, and I think that, funny enough, I think that ties back to what we were saying earlier, and is to consider for a moment what you think, right? Don't just spit things out as they come in your head, because then you're going to do what I just did and just kind of start, and you just hold on, just think for a second, right? And allow yourself to come to a conclusion, even if that conclusion is just like what I said. Yeah, I agree, right?
Yeah.
I think, in general, if we took the time to, first off, have conversations, right? Where we actually critically thought and allowed for those moments of silence and to kind of build off each other's ideas and to reflect on what we believe and hopefully encourage the other person to, like how this whole conversation started when we were talking about the vaccines, right? You have to have those conversations, because the problem is, right, like we said, people just kind of insult the other side. And it's like, that's not going to get you anywhere. Like, I hope you realize that.
You have to actually think about it.
You have to think about it. And you have to consider the other side. Like, why does this person believe that they shouldn't get a vaccine? Or why does this person believe that you should get a vaccine? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's that moment of consideration that I think everybody, including you and I, or everyone's guilty of this, where sometimes you just don't consider it and you're just, no, I'm going to drill my point. It's like, that's not going to get you anywhere, right? You have to recognize that there's a reason people think differently than you. And seeking to understand, even if you don't agree with it, seeking to understand that reason is important, because that's how society becomes better, right? By understanding each other.
This is also one of the more dangerous aspects of kind of getting sucked into a certain way of looking at things. You know, you call it a narrative, you could call it just siding with your side or whatever. But when that happens, you know, you stop talking to the other side, basically. You stop looking at the other perspectives. When you start just buying into one side of things, and you stop listening to the other side of things, I feel like that's when things start getting really messed up. And it's super easy to do that now, you know?
It's really easy to do that, especially with media, right? Social media. Especially.
I mean, it's both easy to and also not to, which is the weird thing. Because if you think about it, in the past, before social media and cell phones and everything, all you had was whatever was physically around you. Whatever the people around you believe, that's what you're exposed to. You're stuck with that, you know? Unless you actively go like to the library or something and you go read books about different things, right? Nowadays, you can actually just go on the internet and literally you could just look up the other side of any argument, you know? But people don't do it. We still don't do it.
And it's so easy to. I think it's easier now to, I feel like, really be in an echo chamber, but also, like you said, to not be. And what does that come down to? That comes down to you being willing to listen to things you don't agree with. And I'm not saying you have to do that all the time. I used to look at stuff like that every day, and what did it do? It just pissed me off, right? I don't think that you should necessarily do it every day, but I think it's good to at least learn about. And I hate this whole idea of the other side, bro. It's so much more than that.
Yeah, it's not even black and white that.
Exactly. Like, I'll give you an example, right? Like, I say I lean somewhere on the left. And if I say the other side, then you're thinking, oh, let's look at someone who's on the right. Like, no, dude, I'm also looking at people on the way left. I'm looking at people like everywhere. It's everything. That's what people got to realize.
People who are more libertarian, who are more conservative, who have different political beliefs and ideologies, different ideas and worldviews about things in different regards, whether it's social, internationally,
Whatever
within
it
the
is.
country, whatever, all kinds of different levels and ways of things. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like you said, it's not black and white. There's so much more to the way that people think, right? Than I think we often let on. You know what I mean? I think it's easy to go, I think this, and if you disagree with this, you're the other. This is the other side.
Wrong.
You're wrong.
You're wrong. Yeah.
And that's a problem, right? We started off this podcast, you and I disagreed right off the bat, right? It didn't seem like it because we didn't get into it, because you don't need to, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, vaccine, good, get it. You're like, maybe not. And guess what? That's fine, right?
Yeah.
We're not here screaming. There's no reason to, because where's that going to get us? Nowhere.
Exactly. Because this is the thing, and this is why I feel like we can have a pleasant conversation about it, is because I believe that there are good reasons not to get it. And I think that if you don't want to get it, you shouldn't get it, etc. But we have some common ground, because I do believe that people who are at high risk should get it. I think if you're an older person, for example, who's at high risk of getting COVID or having severe, symptoms that could, hospitalize you or even kill you, yeah, you should get the vaccine.
Right. So you're able to find common ground.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but the real thing, though, is that we can both agree that even though, for example, you might think it would be good for someone like me to get the vaccine, even though I'm young, and I would say that, like, oh, I'm not at high risk of having any kind of severe symptoms of COVID, is that we can both say, well, you can do what you want, though,
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And I think that that's something where our worldviews do kind of agree, is that I generally think do what you want to do, right? Hold the beliefs you want to believe, just be able to back them up. That's my thing, right? And what did you do? You held your belief and you could back it up. But I also think that, like you said, there's a lot more common ground than I think most people let on. If we had just stated that initial belief, get it,
Yeah.
Like, it seems like, oh, there's this huge disagreement when there's really not, though.
Because we could go back and forth all day about, like, I could tell you why I think you shouldn't get it, and you could tell me why you think that you should get it,
Exactly.
That someone should get it, And we could just go back and forth about that, but that's not productive, because we know we don't agree about that.
Exactly. I think the thing to find is, okay, well, we know where we disagree, right? I think that's the problem with conversations in general that people have. It's like, you're just beating a dead horse. Like, you disagree with this point, and you are likely to not convince this other person to think a different way.
But can you say that? Can you say that's okay, though? Can you say, like, that's okay? You can believe that, and I'm going to believe what I believe.
And not only that, but can you find that middle ground, right?
Yeah.
Or rather, what do you agree on, right? So let's start with that. Okay, we know what we disagree on. Okay, then what's the next stage? Let's find what we do agree on. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how do we take what we disagree with and what we agree with and find some sort of middle ground with everything where it's like a give and take thing? You know what I mean? Yeah. That's how you have a productive conversation, right?
Yeah.
That's how you ideally create a better society, because not everybody is going to believe the same thing, and that's the problem.
And they shouldn't. I mean, that'd be boring.
That would be boring. And the problem is this too: is this country is so culturally diverse. You could not expect people to think the same thing. The South, even within the South, there are different cultures, right? Mm-hmm. And that will impact their way of thinking. And then the culture in California, it's just different.
It's so different, dude. Like, as you move across the country, the way people think in different places all over the place, super different.
And here's the other problem, right? Everybody thinks that they're right. Everybody thinks my beliefs are right, okay? And yours is wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And they'll even get to the moral aspect. This is the right thing to do, and this is the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
The problem is that I think that everybody that says that should go take an ethics class, and you'll quickly change your mind. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
Because it's not that simple. It is very difficult to legitimately prove why what you are saying is right. That's a very hard thing to do.
If you're trying to say, like, something is morally the right thing or the wrong thing, that's
which people make those claims, like, so
all
easily.
The time. We make
like with the vaccine, for example, it is the right thing to do. Okay, why? Yeah. If you ask people why is that the right thing to do?
Yeah,
right
there. They might get weird. And then it's like, well, it's just the right thing. It's like,
so you're saying it's the right thing for the sake of it being right? That's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah.
And okay, then, oh, well, because society is what we accept. Well, just because the society accepts something doesn't necessarily mean it's right. Cultural relativism. Anyways.
No, that's true, though. I mean, there's all sorts of things that society has accepted, things that we find normal that you could say, well, I don't think that's necessarily right, you know? I mean, this is a very obvious example. Like, people use slavery. Like, people used to think that was okay, you know?
Yeah.
It's like an extreme obvious example. But, you know, there are things like that to a lesser degree still today, you know?
For sure.
That could be argued it's right, it's wrong, you know?
Whatever it is.
Like, yeah, like just the vaccine. People will argue about it's right to get it, it's wrong to get it, you know? Or it could be literally anything, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll always be able to argue, well, it's right, it's wrong. There are still people today, I'm sure, who could make compelling arguments for slavery. Well, look at all the economic benefits it has and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, that's great. And then someone else will say, but those are people.
Right.
You know?
Well, here's the problem, right? If you look at it from a all moral standpoint, or your morals are just kind of weird, for lack of a better word, but I think that generally speaking, most people would be able to see, because that's the thing. I think, like, we got to realize is like morality comes in our arguments all the time in the way that we think about stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
With that example, if someone tried to argue about the economic benefits of slavery, which is just fucked, like,
yeah. Well,
but if
there's a
someone did
reason that slaves have been popular throughout history. You
I know.
have one group that
it still exists
dominates.
today. That's the thing people don't realize.
They dominate over another group, and they use that group for their labor to do the things that they wouldn't have their own people do, maybe.
Right. And
Right?
what happens, though, is, so if you look at it from purely that standpoint, hell, you could even bring in morality. They will say it is morally acceptable to do these things, and there's not very good arguments to back that up, but I'm sure someone could.
Oh, yeah.
Where you get into that argument with something as outrageous as that, just because it's the example we used, the argument against it is often a moral one. It's not an economic one, or
Yeah.
it is a moral one. It's like,
But you could also make an economic argument.
you
too.
could. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it, so I'm not even gonna try. But with something like that, morality gets brought in, and then morality becomes the reason for doing it or not doing it. And I don't think that's inherently bad, but you have to be careful, right? With that thing, with slavery, no, that's pretty obvious.
There's a very obvious, like, moral distinction between
Exactly.
either. Yeah.
Now let's look at a less obvious example. Let's look at the vaccine. It's not so obvious anymore.
Like, morally, like, how do you morally say, like, this is right or this is wrong? Or is that even a reasonable thing to say, you know?
Right. It's a difficult thing to argue, which is why I think that there's the problem when it comes to this particular thing, is that often the things that you hear of why you should do it is because it's right? Oh, get the vaccine. This is the right thing to do. Like we said earlier. And it's like, okay, you can't prove that, though.
But, like, why is it right?
Why is it the right thing to do? And it's that why that goes, okay, wait, now it's all of a sudden a little more difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a big part. That's a big part of just knowing what you believe and whatnot is a big part of it, rather, I should say, is just kind of knowing that, like, why, you know? If you look at the different arguments for and against things, I think a lot of times they can be separated out and broken down into different categories. Like, you could have a moral argument about something, but if you wanted to look at, like, the economic cost benefit of something, you could also do that, you know? If you wanted to look at possibly, if you wanted to look at, like, the social benefits of something, you could look at that, you know, look at some of the different ways that something could possibly affect people in positive ways and in negative ways. Right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's just something that we often neglect to think about, you know?
There's different reasons for different things.
Yeah, like something
or lots
could
of
be,
reasons for something. Let's say.
like there could be a compelling moral argument to do something, and a compelling economic argument not to do it, and a compelling social argument and say like, well, this socially could be a really good thing. Economically could be a really bad thing. It might be the morally right thing to do, you know, and you could like flip it around and mix it up, you know. You could say, well, economically, this would be the most beneficial thing to do. It's also morally objectionable, you know. You can make a strong like argument for this thing being morally objectionable, but you could say it's also socially beneficial, you know. And you could like,
There's just so much you could do with it.
Different ways. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, I feel like that just ties into the nuance of things. When you get pulled into like a certain narrative or a certain way of thinking about things, and you start saying like, well, it's got to be like this, and you start lining up your points and saying, well, I think this or I think that. I mean, do you really? You know, because I think if you think about anything, it's not that hard to see, well, it's weird, you know? There's good parts of X, Y, Z and this and that, and there are also bad parts to those things, you know? And I think that those are just things that we really have to think about sometimes a little bit more. You know?
I agree.
Yeah. Fucking weird ass times, dude.
You know
that? There's another thing that we talked about before that I wanted to mention earlier, which was the not just the vaccines and whatnot, but also some of the regulations specifically that were put forth in California. And the weirdest thing too is it's because I read one of the reports that the newspaper had written on these so-called it was the LA Times. They wrote about like guidelines, you know, they call them or something like that. And it's weird because they're not saying that it's going to be like a law. They're not saying that this is going to be like a mandatory thing. They have these weird words for things, you know, where they say like, oh, we're thinking of you know, the state health department might say like, we are thinking that, you know, people will have to show their vaccine card in order to go into a live event.
Vaccine passport.
Yeah. Vaccine passport, but also having like a vaccine card just to go to like a live event. Yeah.
That's what, when people say vaccine passport, that's what they mean.
They're just including that.
That's what that is. It's your the little vaccine card that you get. I don't know where mine is, but I also probably shouldn't show it because it has your medical number on there. But that little card you get, that's what they're calling the vaccine passport. It's not just like literally with your passport. It's also that.
Right.
So I agreed with you though, right? That was something I agreed with you on, was that I think that, don't get me wrong, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I think it made sense to put in certain regulations that did prevent it from spreading. I think that makes sense. As we go on though, and more people are vaccinated, or more people just heard the whole idea of herd immunity, I think, here's what I said, right? If one arena says, nope, like you don't have to, right, it's your choice, because that's the whole thing. If it's a guideline, it's not a rule. If you don't want to, you don't have to. We're opening up to full capacity. Like, I think the UFC is open to full capacity, no mask, no nothing, right?
Yeah.
That's not following federal guidelines, but they just did it.
Yeah.
Right? And if you want to show up, you can. Then that's fine, right? That's the private company's choice to do that. Okay? And it's the individual citizen or individual person that chooses whether or not to go. The other side of that is this. If a private company says, nope, to come in here, you have to have either a recent negative COVID test, or a COVID vaccination card, right? You have to have one of those things and wear a mask or whatever it is. That's the private company's decision to do that. And guess what? That's the beauty of capitalism. You get to decide really? What you participate in and what you don't.
Yeah, and if you're libertarian, or if you're someone who is believes in freedoms for businesses and for individuals,
then you cannot say that businesses shouldn't be allowed to do that.
To say that, well, you know, okay, I think that the problem with that though, with what you just said, is that what if it's like a grocery store or something? This is where we start running into like weird issues where it's like, what if it's like a grocery store? Like, should a grocery store be able to say like, oh, you can't come in if you don't have a vaccine, if you can't prove that you're vaccinated? Like, should that be allowed?
Well, so what's happening right now though, I can't think the way that I think that's a simple solution. I don't think you need to do negative COVID test or whatever to go to the grocery store. It's here. I'll show you. Oh, never mind. I don't have one. I was going to put on a mask. That's the solution.
You're like, we have masks. Yeah.
Like that's something like there's already a solution to that though.
Right. But then see, this is where it gets more difficult though, because then you'll have the anti-mask argument, which is, well, masks don't really do anything. So what's the point of that? You know?
And I think that that's a good point, but I also think that, and we've talked about this on one of the earlier episodes, that like,
sure,
even if it only helps a little bit, right?
Then it's still like worth it. Even if it's like a plausible small amount, that's still something. So
it's better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I think that, sure, maybe even if they don't do much, if it does something that's better than nothing, and again, at that point, like, that's not for the sake of you. Like, I think that's something a lot of the people that make the anti-mask argument often forget, is it's like, these aren't just for you as an individual, right? This is the consideration of everyone, right? Which I don't think is a bad thing, right? I mean, my beliefs are generally, I think that individual responsibility and freedom is important, but I also think that you should consider the whole. And the group, I think that that's important. I think you have to have a balancing act. I think that that's fair, right? If you have to wear a mask, no one's saying that you have to get vaccinated or get a negative COVID test to go to the grocery store or things like that. Go to a restaurant.
Right. But if you could just like put a mask on and then we'll call it good. Even if you don't think that makes any sense, that's better than
because
whatever.
At that point, like the problem is you're only considering yourself and it's like, okay, but there's this whole other group of people, everybody else.
That's really tricky too, because it's like, even though you believe that and you think that these other people are wrong, that because they think masks work, right? And you believe, well, masks don't work. Like, that's so weird, because then it's like, how do we make it so that we can all live together safely? Like, regardless, at that point, it's almost like I was going to say, like, it's almost like the truth doesn't matter, but the truth does matter, right? Obviously,
it
the truth
does.
matters.
No, I agree.
But I think that if you have people on both sides of the fence and they can't find common ground, then the question really becomes, what is the truth? You know? Like,
That's true.
How do we know? And like, why can't we agree on this, you know?
Well, I think that here's the issue, though, is people prove things that are true or not true all the time, and people will still dispute it. People will still go, no, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Right? And there's so many examples of that throughout history. It's today. And it's like, okay, hold on. Like, look, you hold your beliefs, that's fine. Right? Especially at the beginning with the mask stuff, like, we didn't know too much about it.
Yeah.
But as we learn more and we get closer and closer to the truth, it's kind of like, it doesn't, I'm not saying it's being considerate, but at the same time, it's like, it doesn't really matter what you think is true or what isn't true, because there's reality, and there's what you think reality is.
This plays perfectly into something I was just thinking about, actually. And it's the we were talking about social media earlier, talking about how that's kind of helped people get pulled into the certain narratives and kind of locked into echo chambers and whatnot. And it's just that on your phone, for example, or on your computer, if you go on the internet, the world that exists on the internet can be like, you can literally create your own special world that only exists like in your head when you go on the internet, you know, following people that have certain views, subscribing to certain news sources and whatnot, only listening to certain things and believing certain things on the internet. If that's like, if you're just exposing yourself to those things, you know, like whatever the news talks about that day or whatever these people that you're following are talking about or posting about that day, that is like you can make that your reality, rather, I should say. Like, you can go there and you can literally make that what the world is. I think that this happens to people probably too often, because it's so easy to buy into that and to think that that is what reality is.
And I think that the scary thing...
But that's not what reality is.
Exactly. And like, I think the scary thing is you may perceive something a certain way, okay? And the problem with the internet and with social media, especially places like Twitter, allows you to do, like you said, curate your own reality. The problem is you're still a person that has to participate in the real world, right? Mm-hmm. And so now you take this conception of what reality is into the real world, and guess what? Your perception may not line up with what reality is.
It also isn't going to line up with everybody else's reality.
That's true.
Because think about that. If everyone is doing this, right? And I think to a degree we kind of all do, because that is a window. That is a window into like a certain, it's a perspective. It's a window of reality. It's like a little piece of what's real, and it's like a certain way of looking at it. Like the news will give you something and they'll say this is what happened, and that'll be like a certain way of looking at whatever that thing is that happened, right? Someone that you follow will post something, and that'll be a certain perspective on reality. That'll be like a certain way of looking at that. Asian hate was this big thing. I feel like it exploded for a minute. It kind of died down a little bit, but it's definitely an issue, and it's been one of these things that's been trending lately. It's like stop Asian hate. There have been commercials, hashtags, people posting about it, right? A friend might post a video of like an Asian lady getting punched in the face.
Sure.
And say, or they might repost it, and whoever puts that thing out there might say like, look at this is Asian hate. We need to stop this, all blah, 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 right? But that person could also just be taking advantage of that movement, because that video, I've seen this happen actually, where people will post a video with no context, and then they'll just say, oh, it is this thing, but they don't actually know what it is. They don't know what, I don't even know what I just saw. Like there was a video actually that I recall seeing of like an Asian lady getting punched in the face, and it was like horrible. It was like, what the hell just happened, But there was no context. I didn't, and everyone was just saying like, there was no context at all. Who is this guy? Whatever. People immediately just say like, this is Asian hate, and then everyone just puts it out there,
And it very well could have been, but it also you don't know. Here's the problem, right? This is the problem with social media and media in general.
It's kangaroo court. The people just say this is what it is, and then that's what it is. And on top of that,
you get things with we're going to give you a 10-second video that shows no context, and that's all you get. That's a problem.
And then the other problem is that nobody is thinking, what did I just see? Because then people repost it and they say, look at the Asian hate, look at what just happened, right? Or people will post things like someone might talk about anti-vaccine and how the vaccine is like Bill Gates's microchip thing or whatever, you know? And he's like tracking everyone or whatever. I don't know. Like my barber, one of my barbers posted a video about something like that, and people will just post that and repost it. And it's like, wait, what about like investigating all of these things? Like, what about all this stuff he's saying? Like, is there actually any way to substantiate those claims? Is there any truth to this? No, people will just immediately say it's right or wrong, or it's like they just know what it is immediately. And it's like, wait, but we haven't done an investigation. We haven't actually thought to look into this thing and actually find out what it is.
And that's the point of looking into things, is to learn what is this thing that just happened, right? Yeah. You can see someone. Okay. Let's say you see someone shoot another person. Yeah. If all you see is 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and you just see someone, boom, pow, that's all you see, and that's all the context you get, who looks like they're in the wrong? The person that pulled out a gun and then, boom, shot someone. Right. Okay.
Well, there was another incident recently, actually.
I know.
Where a cop
I know what you're talking about.
Shot someone,
I know what you're talking about.
And it wasn't what it looked like. And everyone got mad. But go ahead. We'll talk about that.
But the point is, once you have more, you have to have context of things. But here's the other problem, though. I think that if it's not a 10-second snippet, people won't want to watch it. People aren't going to want to watch the 5-10 minutes that led up to that moment.
Well, that's the thing, is that it's like, again, we're talking about people us creating our own realities with these things. It's just so, I think that what happens a lot of times, is that it's easier to just see something and take it at face value, because then you don't have to do all the work. And then if it ends up not being right, you just say, well, I didn't know that, Well, that's what it looked like, and or whoever said that that's what it was. So that I figured that must have been what it was. It's like we've lost this whole thing of, there used to be this whole thing about don't believe what you see on the internet. And now it's like
all
people
you believe
stop
is what you
saying
see
that.
on the internet.
Yeah, now it's like all people believe is what they see on the internet.
Yeah.
The reality of what's going on. Like, if you walk outside and you go for a walk down the street, say I do this here in my neighborhood, there's no police brutality. There's no hate anywhere. Like, I could go walk down to the park and see all kinds of different people, and everyone's having a good time. And I might like say hi to a mom with her kid, in a stroller, and she might be white or black or Asian or whatever. And like, it doesn't matter, And in another neighborhood, a kid might go out on the street and there might be like fights happening. There might be people smoking weed. The police might be beating the shit out of his neighbor, and like that could be happening in somebody else's actual physical world that's around them.
That's true. So that's a good point then, is...
And this is not on the internet.
No, that's true. And that actually is your reality then. That's actually a good point. I didn't even think about that. That's a good point. Yeah. Is that it's not just on the internet, it's also what you're exposed. But then again, that's why the internet's a tool, and it can be something that's good, because then you can learn about what happens in these different places and go, oh...
But this is where it's weird, is because I can go on the internet and I can read about police brutality or hate crimes or whatever, and I can convince myself that that is what's real. But that's not the whole story,
It's not everything is that necessarily.
Exactly, because like I said, like my reality is not that. If I walk outside, that's not happening. That's not a thing,
That's true. That's a good point.
So, and this is, I feel like, part of the problem, is that it's so easy to get sucked into what's happening and what we see on the internet, on social media. We can very easily convince ourselves that that's what's real.
Yeah. No,
and
you're right.
that is something that happens. But if you look at the world around you, that is not what's happening around you.
No.
It's
a balancing act. You have to find out what the truth is, you have to look at what's going on. What is reality like for you? What is reality like for other people? What is it like for generally, for the overall society? How often do these things happen? And that's how you find the truth. And I think that's something that's hard to do. And I think that's something that people don't want to do. People don't want to examine what's around them, right? Think about it. I don't want to go do hours of research to go figure out all this stuff. I'm guilty of it too, right? My reality is that I live in a suburb. I don't ever really see any of this. It's not a problem.
You run into the police and they bring you home to your mom, and it's fine.
And that doesn't, right.
Yeah.
But the other side of that, right? So that's my perception. That's the way that I understand reality to be.
Yeah.
But the actual reality is likely very different from that. You know what I mean? Just because that's how life is for me here in this suburban neighborhood doesn't mean that's how it's going to be for some kid in the inner city. You know what I mean?
Right. And or in a neighborhood that has bad relations with their cops. Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you have to look outside of what you think reality is in your worldview and recognize that, okay, hold on. I understand this, right? This is my view. And this is everything else. There is so much more than what you think, right?
Yeah.
Just because you think something is a certain way doesn't make it that way.
Right.
And the thing that happens with social media is it often goes to one extreme or another when it's likely somewhere in the middle. Let's look at cops, for example. You get, ACAB, all cops are bad or bastards, I don't remember. The whole thing is it's all bad.
And people will just throw that out there. They'll just drill that point.
And then the other side is nope, they're all good. How dare you say anything about them? Blah, blah, support the blue, back the blue, all this stuff. It's like, dude, one, right? Let's look at the first point. I don't think that's true that every single one of them is bad. That's highly unlikely. The other side of that is it is also just as unlikely that all of them are good. Again, it's somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah. And there are problems, and it's complicated, right?
Exactly, and that's the thing I wish that people would see more. It's like, dude, it's not that simple.
We're going to have to bring this to a close now. So there's one more thing I wanted to hit on just in regards to this idea of what you see is not what is. There was an officer recently who shot, I believe it was a black woman.
She wasn't a woman, she was a girl. She was 16 years old.
She was, okay, girl. Yeah, definitely. And so you know what I'm talking about. This guy, he shoots her because she's chasing after another person with a knife trying to like kill the person, you know? So the cop reacts, you know, stops the threat, you know, dead.
I haven't seen the video, but apparently he says 4 times, drop the knife before he pulls the trigger. Right. Now here's the thing. Context, right?
But that's not what you heard, though, right?
That's not what
that's
you
not
heard.
what people hear, and that's not what people are saying happened.
No.
Right?
I follow a few people who are like, that's not what happened, and they're like going, here's what actually happened.
Yeah.
The full context leading up to that was there was people fighting outside of her house. The girl that got shot's the one that called the cops. Mm-hmm. She's the one that actually called them. And I don't know why she grabbed the knife. I'm not gonna make any assumptions, but the point is that she did. Because there was people outside of her house.
And when the police got there, they saw her trying to stab a girl with a knife.
So whatever happened initially, these other 2 people fighting outside her house were the people that got the cops called on them. And this girl goes out with a knife. And all you see, right? If you pull up and the first thing you see is someone with a knife trying to stab. It's like, what do you do? And he said drop it 4 times.
Yeah.
I'm not saying... Look, don't get me wrong. I'm not a cop, so I'm not going to say what you should or shouldn't do in that situation. I don't know, right? I'm not going to tell someone how to do their job. But what I am going to say is you got to know the full context of the thing. Like, I'm not saying, because all people, the headline, white cop shoots 16-year-old black girl.
Exactly. And then you have this another outcry from people like, we have to stop the police killings. This is horrible. This cop needs to pay. Meanwhile, the guy was just trying to do his job. He did what he thought was the right thing to do.
And on top of that, like I said, that headline right there sounds terrible, right?
Yeah.
If all you see is that,
another
dude,
one. Shit. Yeah.
Right. That's terrible. If all you see is that.
Yeah.
Again, do a little research and it's all of a sudden like, oh.
Like the situation was more complicated. Yeah.
My initial thought was, this is terrible. And my conclusion is, this is still terrible. It's a 16-year-old kid that died, but it's like, it's also like, like it's not that simple. It's not black and white. That's the whole,
exactly. It's not like, it's not like cop bad, cop racist. It's like, no, like there was a situation and it got handled. This is how it went.
And like I said, I'm not going to say whether he handled it well or not. I'm not going to get into that. That's a topic for another time. We don't have time to get into that right now. But the point is that is what happened. And it's, I don't know.
You can, again, it's like you can feed into a certain narrative about things that says all cops are bastards and this and that and racism and whatnot. You can feed into another narrative about the complete opposite. And, you know, that cop, he's a hero. He was doing his job. He didn't do anything, you know, whatever.
And the reality is, again, what's reality probably like? It's probably neither of these extremes. It's probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, it's the world is gray. Things are not simple. Exactly. And we need to be more open to that and more open to these ideas. And also hunger for things like context and for knowledge and understanding, as opposed to just jumping on the bandwagon and saying, you know, Asian hate, all cops are bastards, whatever your thing is, anti-vaccine, don't wear a mask, whatever it is, you know?
And like you said, that wanting of knowledge, context, understanding is how you find truth.
Yeah.
You don't find out what that is by just reposting something and only seeing things you agree with. You will never understand what the truth actually is if you do that.
And it's also part of what helps us all live together harmoniously.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was a good conversation.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate you guys listening.
Thank you for coming. We have stuff happening in the future.
We got stuff happening. Make
this a whole thing. We're going to try to get you guys involved, yo.
Yeah, we're going to hopefully have the Discord set up by next week. Hopefully this week. Probably by next week, though. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you're watching on or listening on Apple, Spotify, or anything like that, you should be able to subscribe. We'd appreciate that.
Subscribe,
Share
give us
it.
a review, tell us what you think, give us things to talk about, etc. If you know us, reach out to us personally. If you don't know us, still reach out to us personally.
Yeah. I always tag our Instagrams in the description, so
Exactly.
we're there. So yeah, but we appreciate you guys listening. And
Absolutely. And with that, we're going to wrap it up.
all right.